Welcome to this session. It's good to have our next presenter, Dr. Timothy Eaton. He's going to present a paper on streams of influence, an early history of Randall University. I'm really looking forward to this. He's the president of the Transnational Association of Christian Colleges and Schools, and he also serves as chancellor and former president of Randall University. He previously served as president from 2004 to 2019, after serving in various capacities here since 1989. When he was the academic vice president at Randall is when I got to know him, and I have benefited so greatly from my friendship with Tim Eaton. He has been a true friend, he has been a prayer partner, he has been an encourager to me in my ministry. And especially when I became president of Welch College, he understood what that was like, and he came around me with encouragement and with friendship, and I'll never forget it, and I appreciate him so much. But he is a consummate professional with a PhD from the University of Oklahoma, who has taught systematic theology and served as a pastor for many years, with an MDiv from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. His best asset is his wife, Martha. They've been married since 1973, and they have 3 grown daughters, Tara, Leah, and Hope. It's such a privilege to welcome Dr. Timothy Eaton again to the podium of the Commission for Theological Integrity's Theological Symposium. Let us welcome him.
I always think, and I tell my colleagues, and then for those who become presidents, people ask me, said, "Are you enjoying retirement?" And I always tell them, yes. I traded Randall University for 140 other Bible colleges, seminaries, and Christian liberal arts schools. I will tell you that there is a truly momentous moment in any new president's life. Most of us are used to the heavy load and really being responsible for much. But the day you become president, I discovered, you are responsible for all. And that's a different, that's a completely different ball game. I am assuming that certainly, okay. I can be loud.
You can't. Oh. No, that's good. Drop it down.
Well, that might be helpful to the whole presentation if it kind of get something in front of my face.
Are we good?
I'm assuming because you're here, because you're a part of our fellowship, for the most part, that you are familiar with the biography of Benjamin Randall. I will tell you that when we named the college Randall University, I told our people that if we can live up to the name and the legacy of Benjamin Randall, we will have run our race well. And so I'm going to move on. I just want to make an observation about the merger of, and I've got a time scheme here. We'll see how it works. The merger in 1910-11 with the Northern Baptist really created, quite a stir. If you will remember, we lost hundreds of churches to Free Will Baptist in just a few years, and I've summarized it with Damon Dodd's summary from the Free Will Baptist story, and he tells us that in that Free Will Baptists in the late 19th century became caught up in ecumenism. And so they were consistently merging with other groups. The Free Communion Baptists came in and joined us, others. But prior to those times, those early mergers, Free Will Baptists were always the majority group. In 1910, because the Northern Baptists came as a whole from the New England states, and the Free Will Baptists in the West, who were not a part of the old Palmer movement, but part of the Randall movement, the votes went church by church. And so you can imagine that many of our churches, my home church, the Jones Chapel Church, that's kind of the legacy church for Southwest Missouri, they voted not to join the merger, and they are just typical of hundreds of rural churches across the West. But here's what Dodd tells us. There were some points in the deliberation. One was to unite quickly with the disciples of Christ. Number two, to merge or move toward the Baptist. And three, which it's hard to imagine today, to join with the Congregationalist. 4 was to remain as we were without any compromise or conference with other people. Only, and this is unique, only Group 4 was ignored. The committee recommended to the General Conference that the vote for the merger take place then and there. 2 items were sticklers for the representatives from Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Nebraska, Texas, and Oklahoma. One was that all doctrinal differences would be settled by the merged body, which meant that whoever had the majority in the merger would dictate the doctrine. It was, I know that'll surprise you all, but some of our deacons weren't too excited about it, and neither were the preachers. The next thing, and this is probably where it hit the road in many places, the monies from the General Conference would just simply be signed over, and eventually that's exactly what happened, to the merged group. A straw vote, and this is fascinating, a straw vote at the conference showed that a majority of the General Conference to be opposed to the merger. And had the issue been decided then and there, it would have soundly been defeated. However, the matter was given to the constituent yearly meetings and associations. It was decided on by a vote in the various associations, and the final result to be tabulated at the Triennial Conference 3 years hence in 1910. Evidently, the New England Free Will Baptist, in a shrewd maneuver, simply moved, and because they were solidly in favor of the merger, this was their ploy to prevent the vote that was imminent, to ignore all overtures at that time and move on independently. Because of that merger, however, we have a number of churches that basically become independent Free Will Baptist churches. There are no organizations. Now, those churches, Free Will Baptist churches in the South, they remain just as they are. But certainly west of the Mississippi, this is quite a problem. And so we need to talk about geography. When I started doing this research, I had always just simply accepted the fact that Oklahoma was populated by Palmerite preachers who came out of Arkansas. And the point being that J.M. Roberts came from Fort Smith. and he was the first among us. So, so I need to give you a little history. Look at the palm of your hand. If you look at the heel, and then divide where your thumb is, that's a third, and the middle, that's a third, and then this is a third. Don't count the panhandle, Oklahoma. That's no man's land, and so we didn't get that till much later. So just note the body of Oklahoma and cut it in thirds. The eastern third is divided between two tribes. And so if you think about Interstate 40 that divides Oklahoma north and south, and then you look at the map, just a little west of Tulsa, Oklahoma, you just draw a line north to south, and north of Interstate 40, north of the Canadian River, from there to the Kansas line, bordered on the east by Arkansas, is the Cherokee Nation. Now, south of the Canadian, south of Interstate 40, is the Choctaw Nation, and those two tribes really represent a majority work in Indian Territory. They are truly the larger tribes. The Seminoles, from basically here to Shawnee and south to the bottom of Pottawatomie County, just north of Ada, the Seminoles are in a small kind of rectangular tract. Now, the reason for that is, if you know anything about history, they were pulling the Seminoles out of the Florida swamp, and they didn't want to come. So the consequence is, the Florida State Seminoles, there's a bunch of them still there. And so they're a very small tribe. The Muskogee Creek are right in the middle of the Seminole, the Cherokee on the north, the Choctaw on the south. And so most of the early history that's written, and in some cases even the very church membership forms, identify our churches as being from the Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek Nation. So that just another bit of history. If you think about it, Interstate 40 was before that Route 66, and before that in the 1900s it was the Beale Wagon Train Road. It went straight west from Fort Smith to Fort Defiance in New Mexico, and so it went straight across through Amarillo and into the mountains. The other thing that is notable is that the Chickasaw tribe seems to be left out of the early minutes and the early history. However, we know there's a lot of activity in the Chickasaw Nation. Now, if you look at it today, Chief Anatubby, who I met 35 years ago at the Bing Free Will Baptist Church when I was preaching there, is probably economically maybe the strongest tribe currently in the state of Oklahoma. Now, the Chickasaw and the Choctaw are brothers. They're brother tribes, fraternal tribes. And so from where the Choctaw leave off at Durant, just north of Denison, Texas, across the Red River, and the Chickasaw go all the way over and overlap just barely the Chisholm Trail. And remember your history. Chisholm Trail comes out of South Texas. It goes through Fort Worth and Weatherford, Texas, and then it moves north up through Wise County, and that is as it goes across Oklahoma, it continues on. And so the Beale wagon train and the Chisholm Trail actually cross. There's a marker about 25 miles west of Randall University, which would be walking for a pioneer, would be a day trip, on horseback a little quicker. And that is kind of the western border of the Chickasaw Nation. We can mark it, Okies can mark it because of the town of Chickasha. And so the Chisholm Trail went across the Red River to Duncan, to Alex, and then to Chickasha, Mustang, El Reno, Enid, and to the Kansas rail yards to transport the beef. So you have these tribal. So a third of the state gets most of the history. There is a significant portion in the Chickasaw Nation, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. I would also remind you that in the 19th century, the West was marked by the jumping off places. So if you were, those jumping off places would be Fort Smith and Fort Worth. Now, I spent many years in Fort Worth, and the people in Fort Worth always told us that Fort Worth was where the West begins. And then they would say, and Dallas is where the East fizzles out. That's not quite exactly, that's not exactly what they would say, but we're in mixed company here. The other jumping off place that you'll remember, St. Joseph, Missouri, the Pony Express, and the wagon train, and Westport, which now is Kansas City. And so that's kind of the picture. So the first recorded Free Will Baptist preacher was J.M. Roberts. He moved in 1884. He moved his family from Sebastian County, which is Fort Smith is the county seat, to Weber Falls on the Arkansas River, just north of what we know as Interstate 40. He rented a farm and began farming to provide for his wife and 7 children, and he began preaching around the old Buckhorn School. Roberts was soon joined in ministry by O.J. Taylor from Texas. That was the first thing I thought, well, how did he get from Texas up there? But the two of them shared circuit, preaching ministry, co-founded the first church in Cherokee Nation, which was the Concord Church at the Buckhorn Schoolhouse. The two ministers continued to serve as co-pastors to accommodate the organization of more churches, and it seemed to stop around 1896 when it's reported that Taylor is still preaching at Concord, but Roberts has moved on to Fields Chapel, which is the second church organized near Purim. There's some question about the dates, however, the founding, because they recorded Elder Roberts' memories, and he puts the founding of the Concord Church, which is the third church founded, around 1885, which would put it being organized before the first church was organized in 1892. So we'll account that as memories for an elderly gentleman. In 1885, another church was organized, the Old Kalahacha Church, which I think quickly just became the Cameron Church. It's in the Choctaw Nation, and Elder Roberts recalls that J.E. McGee, we have a Roberts McGee Association here in Oklahoma, began the work in that part of the country. This would mean that McGee actually was in the ministry contemporary with Roberts, and but also we know that in the 1894 Territorial Association that McGee was the pastor of the Cameron Church. In 1893, the Center Association, which is actually in the Chickasaw Nation, in the Ada area, was organized with Elder Tom Townsend as moderator. Townsend enlisted, and this again surprised me, Elder William Coggins from Wise County, Texas, which that's Decatur. It is one of the not railhead towns, but one of the crossing towns of the Red River on the Chisholm Trail. And they would cross there at Decatur and go up toward Duncan, Oklahoma, in Chickasaw Nation, and then on further. So we're seeing two basically Randallite preachers who are in this movement. Now, also helping in the Center Church was Dr. Maxwell, who came into the Chickasaw Nation from Texas, and he helped them organized, and we don't know much about Maxwell, except we know that later Dr. Maxwell was killed in a gunfight in Pontotoc County. Okay? Is that wrong, Dick? No, we're talking about. Yeah. Elder Coggins, he did not just travel to the Center Association, he stayed. So he left Texas and stayed in Oklahoma, and it's recorded in August the 1917 minutes of the Center Association that he was moderator, and the body voted the following resolution: we extend our thanks to our beloved moderator, Brother Coggins, for his able and wise counsel. Now, this is a perfunctory resolution in most of the old minutes, with one exception. The Center Association inserted the word beloved. So apparently, Elder Coggins was a man among men. In addition, another famous name is on the list of pastors in that Center Association meeting. W.A. Heron is the pastor of the Stratford Church. Elder W.A. Heron is a reoccurring name in many of the early records. He later served on the faculty of Tecumseh College and as an elder, as editor of the New Morning Star. And young William Arthur Heron was present when the Territorial Association met in 1901. He was ordained on April 1903 in Peggs, which would have been in the Cherokee Nation. And I.W. Yandell, Doc Yandell, under whose preaching Heron was converted, called him a great polemic and a prominent preacher. There's nothing that would make Doc Yandell prouder of an individual than that they're a great debater and a Bible preacher. And so W.A. Heron was both. And so in 1905, the minutes record that J.M. Roberts, as the moderator pro tem, the Concord Church, First Free Will Baptist Church in Cherokee Nation, reported that the state of its religion was not good and that it had called Elder Roberts, one of the organizing pastors, to return as pastor for the ensuing year. W.A. Heron is reported as moderator of several congregations. What this means was that Heron, as a circuit rider, that when the church went into business, they typically would call the clergyman that aided that church. And he reports that year that he preached 61 sermons, 11 baptisms, 28 conversions, 12 marriages, and contributions totaling for the year $58.35. Fields Chapel, the number 2 church in Star Villa, notes that it has called Brother Heron as pastor for the coming year. Now, I picked this up accidentally. There's a note of interest from 1904 that the territorial minutes in the Field Chapel church letter. W.A. Heron is listed as the pastor, and Essie Collops, that it appears to be a misspelling, is listed as the church clerk. So it appears that the church clerk is Essie Collops with an E, L-E-P-S. And she is the daughter of a Free Will Baptist preacher from Texas, James Thomas Collops, who we know as Judge James J.T. Collops. He migrated into Chickasaw Nation from Texas. He's seldom mentioned outside the Dibble Association of Free Will Baptist, perhaps because the Territorial Association was concentrated in the eastern tribes. He's just not mentioned. So, but a sketch of his life kind of is taken from his obituary. J.T. Collops was born in October 1853 in Naples, Illinois, which means he probably was too young to fight in the Civil War. Well, I know he was too young. But he married Rosanna Taylor, and the couple had 6 sons and 1 daughter. The daughter listed surviving her father is named as Miss W.A. Heron of Troutsdale, Oklahoma. Now, soon after the Collops married, Judge Collop, they moved to West Texas, where J.T. worked as a cowboy and a ranch boss for many years, later relocating in Denton, Texas, right in that wraps I-35 south from this, I mean, just straight south from here. So Judge Collop, J.T., came to Oklahoma, his obituary says, when the country was still Indian territory, and made his home before the town of Alex. Now, it's spelled Alex, A-L-E-X. It's pronounced Elec, E-L-E-C. I know that because my grandson plays football for the Elec Longhorns, and he corrected me when I tried to call it Alex. So Reverend Collop was always involved in law enforcement, and he was actually carried a bullet to his grave from an encounter with a bandit. He was also ordained, converted at an early age as a Methodist preacher, but his obituary says that later he became a Free Will Baptist, in which faith he died. So that, I mean, that means we're going to assume that he died in grace. The Hawkins Church, organized in 1908, which was basically contemporary with the Oklahoma statehood, was a result of Collop's evangelistic ministry in the area around Elec. After the death of his first wife, he married Caroline Smith in 1892. And which means that he was in Oklahoma typically about the same time that Roberts was in the Cherokee Nation, Collops was in the Chickasaw Nation. And he married his second wife in Granbury, Texas, again on the Chisholm Trail, and soon returned to Oklahoma. So we have Judge Collop, the local justice of the peace, founding the Hawkins Church, and is one of the organizing elders for the Dibble Association. Now, the Dibble Association is probably the most independent association in the state of Oklahoma. Now, you don't believe me because you're thinking, well, every association in Oklahoma is independent, every church. I mean, I was kind of surprised when I came from Missouri and discovered the independence of our pioneer associations. But let me share with you, not only is Judge Collops a founding member of our association, but E.E. Morris, who was on the 1935 Treatise Committee, is from the Dibble Association. So is Clay Ritchie, who was a representative to the National Association in 1935, but he was not sent by the Oklahoma State Association. He was sent by the Dibble Association because they want to make sure they had somebody there to watch. For those of you who are not familiar with that, you might be familiar with Jack B. Ritchie, Clay's son, or you might know Lonnie DeVault, who at 102 years old still drives his third wife to church at the Dibble Church in the Dibble Association each and every Sunday morning. And so they're an independent bunch. So if you know any of these names, you know that. The Pioneer Free Will Baptist envisioned an institution of higher ed in 1905. We, the Committee on Schools, begged leave of the report follows. We believe in encouraging a higher system of education among Free Will Baptists, as education will prepare our children to take their place in the great and busy world as well as in the kingdom of God. It's also, I thought, interesting at that association, just a little tidbit, resolved that we forbid any of our ministers or members of our church in this association from preaching sanctification and holiness as a second work of grace, instantaneous from regeneration or conversion. The Southwest General Conference, which involved churches across a span of the Free Baptist movement, the Randall movement, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. So you have a number of churches represented, and as Davidson tells us, that even though these churches were part of the New England General Conference, their fellowship in General Convention was much more akin to Free Will Baptist polity and government in the Southeast. And I would probably attribute that more to the southern nature of the geography and the Western movement, but it does appear to be the fact. In 1913, the conference included 17 associations in Texas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. This would be after the merger, and boasted 5,000 members. Also, the leaders that came out of the Southwest Association, I.W. Yandell, Doc Yandell, and Hiram and Lizzie McAdams, the great evangelistic team that we had working in our midst for many years. I'm going to briefly go through the Cooperative Association. It has a point, and then I'm going to skip over to Tecumseh College, because if you really want to read Tecumseh College, you just have to read Pick's little-known chapters of Free Will Baptist. He has Tecumseh College and the issues, and I'll mention one particular. But the Cooperative Association, in 1916 in the Philadelphia Church, in Daviess County, Missouri, which is up by St. Joseph. We also have the Mount Zion Church in that area that is still existent, and it was founded to minister to the Pony Express riders. During their, it was actually a livery stable for the Pony Express. So they would train and rest horses in that town, that area. John Wolfe had a great ambition to bring the Randall movement back together in the West. He called this organization, and their first thing was to purchase a press so they could call it the New Morning Star. They started the Free Will Baptist Bible Correspondence School. They empowered the executive committee to establish a denominational school. They adopted the Free Will Baptist Treaties, revised at Harper's Ferry in 1899. I think that particular one, even though it's difficult to come by, I think that probably is the treatise that is the softest on feet washing, which may be part of the clay feet, no pun intended, of the Cooperative Association. And then the final resolution that John Wolfe would be the president of the new school. The minutes of the first to join Cooperative Association were held at the college, Free Will Baptist Church in Tecumseh, Oklahoma, December 26 through 30, 1917. And President Wolfe describes a meeting with the town leaders and gives the presentation. The local bank, the town raised $1,000 to remodel the Indianola Business School. It had two buildings, a brick building, a frame building. They put the print press in the frame building and got it operational first. It was very obvious. And if you read the minutes, and actually I've been reading the Tecumseh newspapers, Elder Smith and Morris were masters of publicity. If they'd have had, if they'd had Instagram and TikTok, they would have gone, they'd been on fire. They received their first endowment from Brother Fuller in Elk Creek, Nebraska, $500, and basically neglected student recruitment, but they opened up anyway and started having school in September. And so, in addition, the first year they printed the Free Will Baptist Treaties, and they were made possible by the generous offer by Brother and Sister McAdams, who actually chose to advance the monies from for the treatise, and then in their evangelistic work they would take the money out. Now, I have in my hand the Brother Marcus L. Morse, M-O-R-S-E. I have his personal treatise. That's significant. I'd actually let you all look at it, but I won't let it leave my possession, because this is the editorial copy for the 1935 Committee on the Treatise. It was printed in Tecumseh, Oklahoma on the New Morning Star print, and in the flyleaf it has the signatures of the committee here, as well as Brother Morris's editorial markings here. And one thing that is noticeable in this is that the flexibility on feet washing was scratched out of this New Morning Star treatise. So the actual and what I think one of the difficulties with Tecumseh College was Brother John Wolfe, while he said he was willing to let it, each church choose how they observed or did not observe feet washing. In reality, it became an obstacle to fellowship. The Tennessee Brother Welch and the Tennessee Fellowship came into the Cooperative Association and left, and by Brother Welch's testimony, the issue was feet washing. North Carolina did the same. In fact, it is also very, very likely that that's one of the reasons things didn't go well in Oklahoma, because Doc Yandell had been here quite a while teaching us that feet washing was a requirement to be in the Church of God, denominated Free Will Baptist. So, the 1909 minutes, we were organized as a state, as the Oklahoma State Association of Free Will Baptist Church of God. I.W. Doc Yandell served as clerk, and it is obvious he exerts considerable influence because the ministers' conference and school for that year was designated to be in Red Oak, Oklahoma, which is the homestead area of Doc Yandell. And so it was there. Also, 1919, the State Association had not met for 4 years. They noted a lapse. They adopted everything again, tried to get everyone to sign up for the New Morning Star, the Free Will Baptist out of Eaton, North Carolina, and the Gospel Searchlight, and the motion to condemn but the interesting thing, there's a motion to condemn the editors of the New Morning Star for refusing to publish the State Association's meeting announcement. So, and it appears that they actually, in an open letter that they paid to have published, that may have been mentioned in that letter. We've lost that letter to the associations. The educational incentives are great. Tecumseh College, like I said, is moving forward. In all other respects, John and Delia Wolfe were highly suited for their jobs because of their training at Hillsdale College. They both received Bachelor of Divinity degrees in 1897. John was the Hillsdale College assistant librarian, 5 hours a day, 6 days a week. He served as assistant pastor of the Free Will Baptist Church in Jackson, Michigan, and prior to graduation in January of 1897, the couple was ordained. And like I said, see Piccirilli if you want to know all the real details on this. At the December 1917 Cooperative Association meeting, Wolfe, the president of Tecumseh College, presented Mann of Missouri, the treasurer, with the legal papers, the deed, the abstract, the property showing no indebtedness. The other and even more important reason that Tecumseh College didn't survive is, I believe, and this is so odd because one of the reasons they didn't get support, the other reason is that John Wolfe left after 2 years, and his successor did not follow the no debt policy. And so we see it. At this meeting, however, everything's debt-free. It's great. The minutes show that Doc Yandell preached twice in this association meeting, kind of at the beginning of the meeting, at the end, and it seems obvious that the people of Tecumseh College and the Cooperative Association are courting Doc Yandell to be more involved in the association. But in 1922, there is no mention of a president. Only the Finance Committee is the only report given, and the statement is, we find the college showered with claims of indebtedness. Just a note, Piccirilli says that Samra Smith, who was president during that time, apparently was signing checks. Lots of them. Lots of them. And so it would appear that the checks became due. Also, after this particular meeting, Samra Smith disappears. Now, he is also, if you read little-known chapters, he's also identified with some of the failures at Unicoi, Tennessee, the college that in far eastern Tennessee. And so I don't know if it's maybe his lack of competence in finances was an issue there as well. However, in 23, John Wolfe is in Haddam, Kansas, but he's still a correspondence teacher. W.A. Heron from Ellick becomes the editor of the New Morning Star, and then B.F. Brown becomes the president of Tecumseh. In 1927, Tecumseh burns to the ground. The correspondence school did not burn, and so it continued under Wolfe. We just don't know how long. In 2019, 2 years after the Tecumseh fire, the Education Committee resolved that to instruct the Education Committee to actually conduct 2 30-day Bible schools, one in each of the eastern and western Oklahoma. The oral history tells us that much of the library survived, so after the faculty gathered their books, that those books were boxed up, put in suitcases, whatever, and that those books were used in the training workshops around the district associations. And when one district or group of ministers would finish with a group of books, then they would pass them to another district. And so for the next couple of decades, we had college in a suitcase, for lack of a better term. In 1932, Doc Yandell preached a powerful sermon on the church and showed that Free Will Baptists practiced the doctrine of Christ and the apostles, therefore were entitled to be called the Church of God. Now, just remember that as the old debater, I.W. Yandell loved to debate the Calvinists and the Campbellites. If you debate a Campbellite, you cannot get hooked into the Church of Christ because of the name. You can't get hung up on that name. So Doc Yandell's argument is the Church of God. And as one old preacher had told me, well, Doc won all his debates. I'm not sure that's true. However, the association was not willing to abandon training for ministers, and so it was announced at that meeting in 32 that the ministers that will teach the Bible school before the next association at Ada will be Elder I.W. Yandell, Acts and Revelation; Elder W.A. Heron, Book of Romans. By the way, Heron is noted by his son Clarence, who was my academic dean when I was here at Hillsdale, that he, after he answered the call to preach, taught himself how to read and Greek, biblical Greek. And then E.A. O'Donnell, and there is some kinship to J.D., the book of John. Just so I can stir things up, let me read another. October 1934, that there would be a connection to the State Association and a similar school in all the district associations each year. October 1935, a Bible school in connection with the Old Time Revival, and I.W. Yandell, T.H. Thomas Dixon, O.T.'s father, E.A. O'Donnell, E.E. Morris were the teachers, and there was a resolution resolved that we, the State Association of Free Will Baptists, go on record as being opposed to the modern teaching of premillennialism. Just in case you think we've forgotten. 1940, Elder Yandell brought the introductory message on the subject, the identity of the church. Now, Doc Yandell's book title includes the identity of the church. He tries to, in writing, actually portray a Socratic method and imitate that debate style that he's so famous for. But it should be noted that when it talks about the identity of church, it's talking about that trail that leads to the church of God. And so that prominent title within our region, the Church of God Denominated Free Will Baptist, that's not an accident. That is on purpose. And then in 1940, at that same meeting, J.R. Davidson gave a talk on the National Educational Program when we were trying to get the Bible College started. And Elder J.M. Roberts, 87 years old, that first preacher that we talked about in Indian Territory, was introduced by Doc Yandell. And the clerk writes, while Brother Roberts talked, much shouting was heard. In 41, the committee recommended that we cooperate with the National Education Board in raising funds to establish a college wherever the board may direct its location. In 42, pastors are encouraged to endeavor to simulate interest in the national education program. In 52, they tried to get the Bible College to do an intercession. I think something along that line happened. In 58, Wade T. Jernigan, the moderator, introduced the three men who were part of the Oklahoma State Association organization in 1908, Reverend Oliver, Elza Yandell, and Reverend I.W. Doc Yandell. Doc Yandell brought the introductory message at the golden anniversary, using as his subject the landmark of our heritage. It's the same message, by the way. I mean, it's all about the Church of God. Doc Yandell's statement is very clear. Basically, as far as he's concerned, Free Will Baptists were the Church of God, the Randallites, until they compromised on feet washing and unholy alliances with other church bodies who were not also the Church of God. And so it's no wonder that John Wolfe was never able to pull Doc into the Tecumseh College fold, even though he did get W.A. Herron. At the celebration of 50 years, marked the beginning of a new dream that had been smoldering in the embers of Tecumseh College. The body voted on resolution number 9, resolved that the Board of Christian Education seek out a location to make plans to establish a Free Will Baptist Bible College in Oklahoma. And I think for lack of time, I better stop there. So.
Take a few minutes for questions.
Hello, Professor Eaton. I wanted to ask you about the correlation between Texas Free Will Baptist history and the Oklahoma history. Which branch of the Free Will Baptist movement is older and started first?
Certainly, the Texas movement as part of the, and remember, Texas, like Oklahoma, has the flow from the Palmer in the south and the east, and then from the Randallites from the north and the west. And so you have that. Indian Territory did not stop travel. People traveled across Indian Territory all the time. There were railroads, stagecoach routes, the Chisholm Trail, you know, the wagon trails, the Santa Fe Trail, all of those crisscrossed through Indian Territory. And basically the Indian nations were content to let them travel through just as long as they kept traveling. Now, most of the settlers had some connection, either a relative or an Indian wife, because, you know, the pioneer women kept dying. And so it wasn't unusual for early settlers to have a second wife. And typically, the most available wives were those who were connected to the tribes.
All right, thank you.
Another question.
Thank you, Dr. Eaton, for doing this. Sorry. Just made me kind of emotional hearing a lot of this. Just because a lot of the, my grandpa ran around with Doc Yandell, and I would hear stories about this. And, my grandpa was born in 1903, and just the stories he would tell, quite frankly, are just so ridiculous that I rarely ever retold them because they're just insane stories, quite frankly. But I was just wondering if you could, and Mike, he was also one of those preachers who took up a second wife from a tribe as well. So,
Hey, I grew up among the tribes. My double great grandfather Granville Hendrickson was a circuit riding preacher, and he lived in southwest Missouri, and his circuit was into the Indian Territory in northwest Arkansas, the old Mount Zion Association, Eddie, that you're familiar with. And so there are still living churches, out of that circuit, even though, he's not mentioned in the Indian Territory records, but his connection is all, in the state of Missouri. And so his records are there. But we don't record that Granville had any converts in Indian Territory but one, and we call her Grandma, and that's how I got my Cherokee card. So yes, I mean that's just the way it happens,
Yeah. Okay, could you unpack the whole connection there between the Campbellites and stuff and this term Church of God, denominated Free Will Baptist? Because I remember hearing my grandpa use that language occasionally, not regularly, but I remember hearing him talk about that, and I remember talking about. Did you ever hear the story of him of Yandell debating a Church of Christ guy and them getting in a chair fight and hitting me over the head and busting him up and then going out to his wagon and getting his medical bag and stitching him up?
I have heard that.
You have?
I have heard that story.
Okay.
I also have heard that that actually Doc was so successful in one debate that the Church of Christ congregation that had come to support their pastor actually left the church. The church was vacant, and they went to the Free Will
Yeah, I've heard
church, in a block.
But if you could just explain that Church of God thing, like explain his logic behind that, if there is some to be found there.
Doc would start from the Old Testament and walk it through. And so his contention was that that the denomination names were only suitable to identify locations and, doctrinal stands, but that there were church groups that were actually remained a part of the Church of God because they had never left the teachings of the Scriptures and the apostles. And so, and he was able to make a disconnect with the Church of Christ that they had left that. One of those was they did not practice the third ordinance. So that was one of his disconnects. And they were so, because they're so biblical, it's hard to explain. If I, being your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, you ought also to wash one another's feet, the same way husbands ought to love their wives. I mean, that's a pretty strong ought. And so that was how Doc handled it. I have his book, and when I get it digitized, I'll share it with you. Okay. But it's a very awkward style because he is trying to imitate debate style in his book, and so it's sometimes a little hard to read. And he was very elderly when he wrote it, and his wife Dovey was his editor, and she was not, she wasn't a match for IW.
Well, let's give Dr. Eaton a hand. I think we might want to start a little bit later. Let's see here. When are we supposed to start our next? It's 7:36, so when were we supposed to start yours? What's that? 7:45. Okay, well, let's come back at 7:50. So that'll give us about a 14-minute break. So let's come back at 7:50.